So we began our project this week. This is Friday. We began it on Monday. We came back from Lunar New Year's, and the students knew that they were going to be able to pick a product and learn everything they could about it. That was about all they knew about this project. So besides all the uploading of information or preloading of information that I felt they needed in order to be confident to begin the research part and the collaborative part of this project, I also wanted to give them a couple of activities that would get the brain moving and thinking and stretching about global production and about consumers and about energy use and consequences. So the first thing that we did was, before we did anything else, we did a little gallery tour where I put up posters on water, land, air, and a question mark. And I asked them to write down on little sticky notes ways that they help the environment to be a more positive place for all of us to live. So I wanted to start this project with the students thinking about what do they do that is good for the environment. And they each came up with 2 or 3 ideas, and we were able to then talk about that and pull that together. And I think they began to start the thinking process of how we as individuals interact with our environment. And the next activity that we did is they checked the tags on their t-shirts and jackets and shoes to find out where they were produced, in which country were these clothing items produced. And I had a Google map up on the whiteboard, and they would head back to my computer and they dropped the pins and then opened up the pins and saw that there's a box that opens up in which you can create many layers of information. And there's a lot more things you can do with that, which we can talk about later. And they wrote down their name and what the item of clothing was. And part of their homework that night was to find 3 to 5 more items, not necessarily clothing. And the interesting outcome of that was that the majority of our items here in Taiwan are produced in the Eastern Asian countries. And we started to talk about that. And the students were able to come up with a lot of ideas that will tag directly into how they trace their team's product from the raw materials to the landfill, if that's where it ends up. These products can be delivered cheaply and more easily from Vietnam and India, even China, of course, South Korea to Taiwan, rather than the United States or Europe or even African countries. They may find that the raw materials for the products that their teams choose are unlike the products that we use every day, that their particular products may use raw materials that come from far and wide, and the impact of that will be on transportation costs. The third activity that we did, I called Food for Thought, and I just wanted them to start thinking about the choices that we make when we buy a product, where there are cheaper versions of the product or more expensive versions of the product. I bought a box of cookies that had about 30 little macaroons in them. And then I bought one gourmet macaroon from the same bakery that cost 70 NT, or roughly about 20 cents less than the box of 30 cookies. And so we looked at the packaging and we looked at the cookies, and they predicted which one they would rather have. Would they rather have 3 to 5 little cookies or one of the bigger cookies, and why? And was there, most importantly, is there a right or wrong choice? Is it wrong? Are we being necessarily selfish to take the good product and to live the gourmet lifestyle? Or are we being greedy to take the smaller product or the less expensive product because we can eat more. Are those even valid arguments to make when we start talking about consumer education? So we masked the cookies and found out that 3 of the little cookies equaled the 1 larger cookie. So out of the box was equal to approximately 7 to 8 of the bigger cookies. So then they began to talk about, oh, well, if I can have only 3 little cookies versus 1 that looks amazing and might taste amazingly better, maybe I should go for the good cookie. And we had that talk. And then we took the big cookie and we tried to cut it into as many pieces as there were students, and they tasted it and could obviously taste the difference in the quality of the ingredients that went into the bigger cookie than the smaller cookies. But they were split. Half of them would have liked the smaller cookies because to them not only did they get more or felt they got more, but they liked the less rich taste, and half of them liked the gourmet taste, which led us to talking about ingredients that are real ingredients, real vanilla versus chemical fake ingredients, and does and should that have an influence on what we decide to eat or what we decide to feed our families. And so a lot of little side conversations happen that I think will help their brains open up as they talk or research about their product and the pros and cons of the types of ingredients that are involved and the people working with those ingredients. They also themselves came up with the idea of that the bigger macaroon looked handmade. So we have a handmade product versus perhaps a mass-produced product. And how does that affect our world of consumerism? So just something as simple as a cookie activity can break the doors wide open for kids, particularly in middle school, as they for the first time begin to think about consumer education. So that was a fun little project that we did. Following that project, the next thing I had planned for them was a survey. And it was sort of like a carbon footprint or an ecological footprint survey. The survey asked them questions about whether or not they use a lot of items that are one-time use items that could maybe be washed or used again or recycled, but they throw them away. There were perhaps 20 questions along that line, and they evaluated themselves. It wasn't for me, it was just for themselves to think about what kind of consumer they are. And then that led to our last activity this week, which was to revisit the posters on what do we do or what can we do to make a more positive change or influence on our environments. Right as I introduced that activity, in came their mentors for the first time. So I introduced them to their mentors. And the kids are kind of looking at the mentors like, oh my gosh, they're gonna want us to know stuff that we haven't even learned the vocabulary for yet. So the mentors joined their groups, and within 2 minutes there was full-on integration of conversation and sharing of ideas. And the older kids provided some new insights, and the younger kids were able to explain the project, all of these preloading ideas that we had already talked about what their project was going to be. They were able to share that back, which gave me formative assessment information on whether the kids were ready or not to go forward with their project. And then as they started to create their sticky notes on what they could do or things that they are already doing that is a positive contribution to their environment, went much faster. And they were able to also isolate more of the things that we do that don't come under helping the water, helping the land, helping the air. They come under the question mark. And they were able to begin to separate out those question mark activities into how we use energy. So I'm feeling really positive about this. There's 2 or 3 teachers who are working with me now on this, and so it's starting some collegial collaboration, and it all looks really good.